Welcome back. You're watching AM Agenda. In about an hour's time, the government is going to hand down findings, a review into supermarket giants and the powers in which they have. We've already had a bit of a preview of what the government might adopt and might not adopt, but let's bring in live now political editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew, good to see you. We've seen a few hints along the way. This review done by Craig Emerson. Obviously, the first thing is to say here, a voluntary code of conduct did not work.
No, and look, they've got that right, but this is an interim review. He's putting it out for consultation. Then they'll get a final review in June 30. And I think it's fascinating how there's this government opposition war at the moment on who can get out first with their policy on what to do about Coles and Woolworths. And what we really need in this country, which everyone knows is more competition, instead both sides are talking about a big stick. Well, that might work a bit, but if you hit supermarkets with fines, and if you say to supermarkets, which Craig Emerson seems to be doing, you got to pay your suppliers more, guess who pays for that in the long run? Us.
We do.
So I don't see a solution here, but I do find the timing interesting. It's become clear, it's leaked out, the Nats and Libs are working on this divestiture kind of policy. And no doubt that's going to be part of the budget reply speech. So what the government's doing here...
It kind of worked, just the threat of it kind of worked in the, the energy sector? Not really.
The coalition would argue that. So you've got then this situation where the government needs to put this out before the ACCC review in June and the final when this report comes down in June, because they need to counter what the opposition's trying to do. And so we've got to, and how convenient for governments to put the cost of living blame onto corporations. I mean, we'd all probably do the same in their shoes. And I'm not saying there's not room to attack some the way suppliers are treated, or indeed super profits. But ultimately, is this going to solve everything? I don't think so.
No, and ultimately they both see a lot of votes in this, at least their tough talk around it. Well, let's talk about housing.
We need more competition.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
What we need. 80% three supermarkets in this country. What do you expect's going to happen?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Well, let's talk about housing, because that's another intractable problem that we have. It's all down to supply and demand. Supply is slow, demand is not slowing down. The premiers have adopted this, their share of this 1.2 million homes at target, and no one's saying that they're going to be able to reach it.
Yeah, well, Chris Minns is saying yesterday on Sunday Agenda, I can't reach it. And I thought I'd raise this with you, Laura, because I know you've been big on this issue, and rightly so. We've got all this net migration, and yet the houses aren't getting built, to the extent the state governments are saying, well, look, we need more tradies. So we're getting 500,000 people in a year or more, and not enough tradies still. So what are the feds doing about this? But Oxford Economics put out a report overnight saying that the median house price in Sydney in 2027, which is only 3 years away, will be $2 million. So this is where Peter Acterstrat, the New South Wales Productivity Commissioner, was saying people between 30 and 40 just aren't going to live in Sydney, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So
$2 million.
Yeah, and $1 million for Perth, incidentally. Here's Chris Minns on it, the New South Wales Premier, yesterday. He must have been concerned when the New South Wales Productivity Commissioner said if we don't act, we could become a city with no grandchildren.
It's horrifying. I mean, it's everybody's worst nightmare. It's what happens when you have a decade of undersupply of housing in Sydney as a result of unnecessary over-regulation and red tape, as well as a tendency across all levels of government to say no without thinking about what the consequences are. And the consequences are serious. It means that young people don't get to write their chapter in the next part of Sydney's history.
Yeah, you have parts of Western Sydney that have taken thousands upon thousands of people over the last couple of months. They can't keep up with the infrastructure. The schools are at breaking point, and there's not a solution here. So, look, we need migration. Everyone agrees with that. But the government at a federal level doesn't seem to be, drawing a line between the problems you see in some of these suburbs and what their policy is at a federal level and what they control. And places like Sydney and Melbourne do take the lion's share of these new migrants.
Well, they say they're going to bring the numbers back, and this feeds into the GST argument as well.
Students can't even find student accommodation.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, they're talking about putting out modular homes. Julie Collins just dropped this to me the other day on Sunday Agenda, and Ed Husick followed it up with a story.
Yeah, that's what Rose Jackson's been doing in New South Wales. Like, I mean, modular homes have come a long way, and
Just build caravan parks. That'll do it.
Oh.
Tents.
I'm sure they'll love that. Anyway, let's talk nuclear. Where's that debate up to?
Well, I think it's interesting because one of the issues Peter Dutton will have is the premiers. Most of them are Labor. Most of them are going to oppose it. And Chris Minns was doing just that yesterday. Let's hear from him, and let's hear Anne Ruston's response on Sunday Agenda. Would you be keen to see a nuclear power plant go on a former coal-fired power station site?
No, I wouldn't. My problem is that coal-fired power stations in New South Wales, the majority of them are due to run out and expire in the next decade. So I've got a problem right now in bringing on new power supply for reliable and cheap energy for New South Wales consumers. And the federal opposition's timetable doesn't go anywhere near meeting the massive demand on power in the next 10 to 15 years.
We're entirely reliant on the East Coast if the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. So I can understand why Peter Malinauskas would be interested in nuclear, because he is in a world of pain because we don't have baseload power in South Australia. We need to be having this conversation with Australia, because right now, I mean, even Chris Minns, he sounded like hope was his strategy around what he was going to do for his baseload power when his coal-fired power stations go offline. There needs to be a level of certainty built into our energy mix right now.
Look, I think the problem, Peter Dutton's got, is it's hard enough to prosecute these from government, but from opposition you can get slammed. You can have government departments putting out reports saying what you're saying is wrong. I've seen it at the state level quite a bit over the years. Colin Barnett had his water pipeline up to the north of Australia, and Peter Debnam said he was going to recycle water instead of a desalination plant. He's really taking a risk here, Peter Dutton, with this strategy, with this policy. And the polling, it was revealed over the weekend, isn't that emphatically for it, but he's determined. He keeps stripping bits of it out. It's no doubt going to be in the budget reply speech, and it's going to make for a fascinating battle in the next election campaign. The saving grace for him, I guess, is Anne Ruston's point there that, well, what's your solution then? Wind and solar does the lot?
Well, they're just hoping batteries actually come online or are much better, and it doesn't exist right now. Hydrogen is not there. Pumped hydro, super expensive and doesn't work all that well. It's diesel generated most of the time.
Both sides are relying on technological advances we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But also, Peter Dutton can't win the next election on a nuclear strategy alone. It just doesn't, if people...
Far from it, in fact.
That's right. But he could win it coupled with cost of living issues.
I expect him.
Minority.
He will be hoping, just as the government is, ironically, for rates to be cut and inflation to come down, so he can bring forward a bigger package of tax cuts, I would expect, without being accused of driving inflation.
Anything else you got cooking? I know this is the overdrive season for you before the budget's handed down.
We got a month. Let's see how we go.
All right, good. We'll keep on it. Andrew, good to see you.